So spiral dynamics is important to me because it contains an integration of a lot of different developmental models. How many of you did study the stages of development, human development, childhood development, any of that stuff when you were in school? So some of you will have, so you'll recognize some of this. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit of the history. Human beings have this sort of nature-nurture developmental set of influences. And we know about the biology and the genetics that come. For those of you that have children, you know how they came out a certain way. Like already they had some things going for them that were different than the next baby in the batch. And that is temperamental variables in large part. So those are all the temperamental variables that have been studied for a really long time now. There's a group of how old would they be now? They'd be in their 80s, I think, that started getting studied when they were in utero to see if they could find out, will over time these different variables stay pretty much the same? So you know how some babies are super active and some are more passive. The biological rhythms, those are the circadian rhythms that we that kind of monitor and keep us in sync if they're working well. Some babies are super, super sensitive, and some you can have them in the middle of a stadium and they're just fine. That sensitivity thing is something that can show up in lots of ways later on for an adult. So for instance, people that are hypersensitive and can feel other people's feelings and can feel the energy in the room tend to continue having that capacity. It's not something that we value very much or reward very much in our society. But people that have it know it because they're influenced by it tremendously. They carry a lot of stuff around with them that others don't. Some of us are very strong impulsive reactors, and others have a pause. How many of you do have a good pause? That's good. Not enough of us have a good pause.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that, like my daughter Danielle, who's a 5 on the Enneagram, her temperament is that she's much less likely. She just got some really bad news also with talk. But it took her 5 days to even think to tell anybody about it. Like that's a big pause. That's how she reacts. Yeah. Approaching withdrawal in very different stages of development where that's called rapprochement. It's a coming and going kind of a thing. So some children, some adults want to approach a person in a situation, and the rest and others are more likely to, when you start doing your thing, kind of back away from it. Some of us are very persistent. I heard that in the check-in. There's a lot of that persistence. That's kind of our go-to in a certain way. How distractible we are. So we know when this set first got made, ADHD was not a big thing in the psychology world, and of course it is now. So they had it listed as a temperamental quality. We also know it has stuff to do with the brain structure and the brain chemistry. And then mood. Some of us are just naturally grouchy. And some people are naturally happy babies that never change that, and then some babies that cry all the time. So that's all what we're carrying around from nature, but of course, all these different containers that we have in our lives, developmental containers, Lippincott calls them psychological holding spaces, places where we hang out enough that we get dosed with either the really negative impact in an environment, or it's hopefully the positive as well. So it's your family and school, any of the things that you hung out with a lot as a kid that you know had an influence on your value system and the morals that you carry around with you today. But also the peer stuff. Did anybody hear the NPR story yesterday about how they were having a lot of trouble with bullying in a school, and they redesigned the lunch session and have assigned seating? And so the kids walk in and they're told where they get to sit, and it changes every day. And so there are no children sitting by themselves. and there are no children clumped up in little cliques. Just some little social engineering like that could go a long way for what we know happens in most schoolrooms. And then higher education and how much education we get has a lot to do with how we develop. So there's all this different developmental stuff. I'm not going to go into it all. You do have access to this PowerPoint. I just wanted you to see that all that developmental theory into the individuals, some of which you will recognize, like Piaget is probably in education anyway, the person that most people know about his theory set. But basically, all of them in some way or another say that there are certain developmental steps that we need to achieve in order to go to the next level of development. I don't know if they're still saying this, but when my kids were babies, they used to say that if they didn't crawl, they just went straight to walking, that they had skipped a developmental step that was going to show up later. At that time, they were thinking it was related to dyslexia. Do anybody know any of the real data on that?
Yes, it's reading. It's the left, right.
Okay. Yeah. So things like that. And I would propose that in our culture, we probably have a lot of things that we do try to skip over developmentally. And if you think about how we do that in groups, there's a lot of stuff at ASU that's super developed, and there's a lot of stuff that's really not very well developed yet. So some of our work as the culture weavers is to begin to identify the places, the pockets in UTO that are alive and happy and are already pretty developed, and also the things that need some tending because we didn't look at that early enough. And then there are two kind of gurus. Edgar Schein is really the guy that started looking at organizational culture in the first place. And then Ken Wilber is the person who has taken all of this stuff and put it into what he calls integral theory. He's an American philosopher. He's a very interesting man. He's the first book I read of his was The Brief History of Everything, and he's kind of like that. He's, like one of those take everything, put it together, synthesize it kind of people. All of his work is really helpful to look at. So about the same time that Maslow was coming up with his theoretical framework for the hierarchy of needs, Claire Graves was also working on what eventually became spiral dynamics. Claire unfortunately died before it really got out there. And Don Beck and Chris Cohen took it on and wrote a book about it, which is when I met it, back in the early 2000s or so. And then since then, Ken has taken it, and Wilber has taken it even further and began to embed it in his own integral theory model. So what I'm going to show you today is that. It is at least a good chunk of the spiral dynamics integral model. But if you look online, you'll find that spiral dynamics by itself looks a little bit different. It's mostly the colors and what they name the different levels of development. So it's two-tiered in that there's the first tier are stages of development that we are aware of where we are, but we're not aware of anything above or below us, like we're just not conscious of that being true inside of ourselves. In the second tier, we can embody everything and really be choiceful about which place we're coming from. And probably the main focus for spiral dynamics are these value means. Now, he started using that term mean before mean became a thing here now. So I don't know if it's going to translate well, but basically it's a cluster of beliefs. It's a worldview that we hold in concert with lots of other people. So these worldviews live inside of us, as I said. So the law and order worldview that I was raised with, that everything has a place, that you can hear when I talk about I wanted to control everything, when I talked about that in the check-in. That comes out of that worldview. It's not that it's a bad one, it's just that I've grown hopefully a little bit beyond that one. But we have everything inside of us that ever got conditioned, planted, or through those genetics are in there. And when we feel stressed, we tend to regress. Some of you have done the Enneagram and know, or other personality instruments, and know that there are all kinds, like Eric was saying, he's a 7, he goes to 1 under stress. it is typical that our stress point takes us back down the spiral, if you will. There are quite a few people that dislike this spiral model because it implies a hierarchy. And so that's why I like this picture here. I don't think it implies the hierarchy nearly as much. I just wanted you guys to know that. And every meme, every value level has a breakthrough in it. So I'm going to walk you through them. Think about if you are okay with that spiral that's upward like this, the bottom rung of that spiral is the red meme. And we are seeing a lot of that in the world right now. And it's a fairly low level of development. So it's very aggressive, it's very impulsive, it's very egocentric. So it's started about 10,000 years ago, and we think it was the early stages of sort of ego development. And you can see that be what you are and do what you want. That's the kind of motto of that group. And there's this pretty negative, we've got to protect ourselves kind of set of thoughts that go through a person's mind or a group's mind. And so I didn't say this, the entire model is both looking at our individual consciousness, the development of our own consciousness, as well as the development of groups and cultures. So right now we can see quite a few groups that are pretty red as a whole. We would certainly call ISIS a red group, but I also think we can see plenty of evidence of that in our own country as well, groups that are very red. This guiding metaphor is that they're the wolf pack, and that people need to be dominated. They are just not, we've got to have somebody that knows what they're doing, and it's the strong leader, and that workers will put up with a lot if their basic needs are met. And the breakthrough here was, before this meme came into being, it was really just pretty chaotic. Like there was no structure much whatsoever. Sometimes we call that the kind of chaos level. But the breakthrough here was that they began having a division of labor. I always think of Game of Thrones or that kind of mythology when I think of the red meme. So we've got that mentality showing up a lot, probably not exclusively, but it does show up quite a bit. In the old version of spiral dynamics that I learned first, this would have been called the blue meme, but in Ken Wilber's integral model, it's called the amber meme. So there is much more sort of dispassionate structure. It's not structured around the leader so much as it is structured to get stuff done. Think about the army, think about police, think about any hierarchical system. So we have a lot of this here at ASU. And it started about 5,000 years ago, so not so long ago. And life does have meaning and direction and purpose with some specific outcomes in mind that we think we know we can predict. So think about how much we do use goals and things to pull us towards the future. That's this meme. The worldview is that people work the best when they are told how to do things the right way. So someone evidently knows what the right way is and tells others that. It's very much focused around duty as well. That's what gives my life meaning, is I have a duty to my country, or a duty to my family, or a duty to ASU. And the breakthrough here from the previous meme is that formal roles are stable and scalable. So they're not as much about the personality of the leader as they are about the boxes. And that's what gives us order. Any good examples of this amber meme?
The Army.
The Army, for sure. Yep. All of the military have this meme as sort of their primary meme, but a lot of them have also developed especially in the leadership ranks, very far above that. Any other how about examples around here? Go ahead, Kelly. What did you have?
Well, it's making me think of Confucius, because Confucius was trying to bring
like moral truth and teach the society about duty, like what's everybody's role,
Right,
how to be
right.
respectful to one another. So it's just
Yeah.
making me think of Confucius, and I wonder how the timing. I don't know about Confucius's timing, but
I think it's right around in there, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff that happened about 5,000 years ago. The genesis of so many of what we think of today as religions. Yeah. As I said earlier, you really can't skip a level of development. So I would like everybody to be at the very highest levels, wouldn't we? That'd be just so wonderful. However, if you find a group that's kind of stuck in this, the next developmental step is the rung right above it, which I'll get to just now. So about 300 years ago, we started into this orange meme, this achievist. It's pretty entrepreneurial. It really does reward people that are playing the game hard. I'm listening to The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and he's discriminating between finite games, which have time frames, structure, winners and losers, rules, right? And there's a declarative winner at the end, whereas really almost everything, if not everything, is an infinite game, and the game is to keep the game going. The game is to continue the evolution. And so this meme, starting about 300 years ago, came in with the Industrial Revolution, and all the captains of industry and people like that lived pretty strongly here. And it is a machine metaphor. When I first started doing organization development work, this was probably the primary edge we were on, is we know we're not a machine. This organism that we call University Technology Office is not a machine. It's an organism. It's alive, and it does things without those machine parts. I actually work pretty hard not to use machine metaphors when I'm thinking about or talking about what's happening in an organization. It's easy to use machine metaphors because we've kind of been trained for that. The worldview is that people are motivated by the achievement of material rewards. Milton Friedman, the economist, really took that and ran with it, and really has shifted the entire economic system in the free market to what companies are there for is to make profit. That's it. Quite a big deal. And that this competition is good for us, and that it promotes individual growth as well as company growth. The breakthrough here is that there's innovation, accountability, and meritocracy. So, examples of this. Wall Street, definitely. Yeah, so this is probably still today in the US the primary need. That's polling guiding. And if you think about, so I'm going to take a little bit of a leap here. I haven't thought this through very well, so think out loud with me. What if, you've seen Michael Crow's slide where he talks about the different kinds of colleges, there's the land grant and there's the academy, and we are the enterprise level. Consider this the form that ASU is moving away from, and this being more the form that it's moving to. So it really does tend, in my experience, to hook the ego, this meme. So when we live in it day in and day out, it's really helpful to be conscious that this is part of what we're in. By the way, I see this in the government work I did with all the governmental organizations I consulted to, much more this way. This is much more business, the business sector. And this is sort of the nonprofit social sector world, is the green meme, which came in about 150 years ago, but really got instantiated during the 60s, when folks were like, to hell with this, we are going to do something. And interestingly enough, the folks that have been playing with these memes for a long time and studying groups and stuff say that there's sort of two sides to the green meme. The green meme is the final meme in the first tier, and that is the really positive meme about community and egalitarianism. And there's also the mean green meme, which is the the example they were using a while back was when Greenpeace would blow things up or do something that was destructive in the name of sort of social progress. So the guiding metaphor here is the family. That's what we've got. That's what we went to in our visioning work together. UTO is a work family. And people want to get along and feel accepted by their peers, and sharing and participating is better than competing. And then the breakthrough here is that empowerment, egalitarian management, and stakeholder model. So a lot of the work I've done has been in this realm because there was a growing interest in what can we do to tap the collective intelligence. Okay, so now we're moving into the second tier. The second tier is aware of all the other needs, is aware of that development having taken place, and values them all. Doesn't have a, like, oh, yeah, I didn't say this. So if you think of the spiral like this, wherever you're sitting on the spiral, you feel terribly threatened by the being right above you. So organizations that are very orange are feeling threatened by this green movement. Right? So they've created, corporate social responsibility initiatives to see if they can get at that green stuff, but it's not really grounded for them yet. Okay, so we're in the second tier now, the teal mean. And it did start just about 40 years ago with people starting to have this sense that there's a wholeness. When Einstein was creating his theories, he did still perceive, for the most part, the universe as a machine. And so quantum physics brought in with it this understanding that, actually everything is truly, it's not just a fantasy, is truly connected. There's all these different energy systems that are connected. And so that's what this meme represents, is the wholeness, and that there has to be some element of body, mind, and spirit in everything that we do. Spirit doesn't necessarily mean religion, but it does mean that there's a sense of something more intelligent than oneself. And the guiding metaphor here is that it's living. As I said, we are a living organism, and there are spiritual bonds that pull us together, and that work must be meaningful to ourselves and to some kind of contribution that we're making. The breakthrough here is self-management, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose, a sense of we're here for a reason, and we are part of the evolution that's occurring, and we're being intentional about that. Yeah, so this has a little more info in it for you guys when you look at the PowerPoint later on, but the book itself is, it's an interesting read, because what he does is he went sort of researching around the world and decided that there were actually some examples of teal organizations. So here are some of those examples, and the ones that I have in the teal color are ones that I actually know something about. Morningstar, they've got this great video. I don't know if it's still up on their website, but one of my friends was their primary consultant when they were making the shift towards a teal model. They're the largest producers of tomatoes in the country, which is kind of cool. Literally, anybody, the janitor, the person out on the tractor in the field, the person in the boardroom, anybody can make any decision within just a very few sort of givens that they have. And they know what those are, and it really reduces a lot of the hierarchy of bureaucracy. It's a very, very, very flat organization. And then Patagonia, the clothing folks, Yvon Chouinard is, I interviewed him several years ago for a research project, and they employ more people than this now. And did you see that when they received their tax break as a corporation, they did not take it, they gave it away? That's really pretty teal. It's like, not only are we not going to be all about money, even though their stuff is like so expensive, right? It's really high quality stuff. But he's very intentional, has been very intentional about how the organization is structured so that it can be this teal organization. Sounds True. Any of you listen to their videos or audios? That I would tune you there. There's lots of good content there, lots of good free content. So Tammy Simon is the person who founded the Sounds True, and it is completely organized around the kind of principles that we've been talking about. And then Holacracy is actually a sort of organizational governance model. And Tony Shea at Zappos had not done this when I was consulting with them, but he did quite a little bit later start to install Holacracy. The reason I'm telling you this story is it wasn't a very teal thing to do, to install a whole system of governance that he just sort of plopped on top of that organization. And he sort of had a, if you don't like this, you can leave kind of attitude about it. Holacracy is a very progressive governance model, and that said, he didn't get the inside out view of what would work best around here. Okay, so here's the get off on your own part. So in yourself, yeah. Thanks. So if you guys would split up into little groups, like 4 or 5 people, and just have a conversation about these, and then we'll surface some examples at the end, and I'm going to capture that. Okay? So about 10 minutes in your groups. Where do you see the needs in yourself, in your team, at UTL, and at ASU?